Something that you can do right away is just start really visualizing what you're planning on doing and what happened on your last attempt. And that'll start giving you just like a better sort of mental architecture for understanding and diagnosing what you did and why.
You heard it. They were waxing their floor and waxing themselves into a corner.
Come on, Vincent.
Come on, Vincent.
Yeah.
Good, buddy. Come on.
Come on, Vincent.
Come on, Vincent. Come on.
Come on, dude. You know what it is. Go get it.
Good. Come on.
Buddy?
You got a beast. Come on.
You got it. Come on. Come on, Vincent.
Yeah, buddy. Come on. Breathe.
Yeah, one more.
Come on.
Yeah, buddy. Come on.
Come on, Vincent.
Strong.
Come on, you got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, come on.
Come on.
Yes, buddy.
There you go. You got it.
Come on, stand tall here.
Yeah.
Come on.
Come on. Yeah.
Yes. Come on.
Yeah, baby.
Come on, man.
Come
Come
on,
on.
you got it.
Come
Come
on.
on, baby.
Yeah, you're right
Open
there.
that hand.
Yeah, man.
Get the foot.
Foot up.
There you go. Come on.
Yeah, buddy.
Nice, dude.
Come on.
Congrats, dude.
Come on.
Come on.
You know it. You know it.
Yeah, Vincent. Come on.
Come on, dude.
You're good. Nice.
Come on, man.
Deep
Easy.
breaths.
Come on. Come on.
Just keep
There
breathing.
you go.
Yeah, buddy.
Come on. You're good.
Yeah.
Come on, Vincent.
Come on, buddy.
Yes, Vincent.
Yeah.
Sick, man.
Welcome to an extremely special edition of the Anatomy of the Climb. Today we are so lucky to have Dan Beall join us, who is an actual professional rock climber. Dan is essentially the spirit of the Buttermilks. I've been told if you whistle 3 times around the Peabodys, he will show up and bring all the stoke with him, and maybe even a ladder.
Maybe some crash pads.
Maybe
Sometimes
some
we'll
crash
need
pads.
it. Yeah.
And I mean, so obviously we had to choose a classic problem for that area, Evilution Direct, which I think your tally on that. How many times now have you climbed this one?
I've only done it to the top probably a handful of times,
Handful,
but
okay.
the evolution of the lip I've done at least 300 times over the last decade, minimum.
So the 2 videos we're going to compare actually is a climber Vincent Mollicone on the left and BadWater Bouldering on the right. Now they actually have like a really cool like long uncut video about like the whole process of their climb, and they talk about all the moves and show all the holds. So that's a really cool one. You should check it out. But thanks to both of them for allowing us to use their footage of this climb. All right, so let's get started. We'll just let it run and we'll see what we got here. Set
Sure.
up for the first move. I heard those holds are kind of glassy.
Yeah, the whole climb is actually quite glassy, but it's the type of rock that you'd prefer in the Buttermilks. There's basically this very coarse quartz monzonite that really tears at your fingers, or you get this nice water polished patina, and almost all the classic lines out there are of this like kind of glassy patina type. Tends to just form kind of like cooler, more inspiring features. You get these rad like water runnels and crimson ears and things. And also it's just a lot more forgiving on the skin, so you get sort of like the grandeur of the Buttermilks without sort of like the death spikes that it's a little bit notorious for. So I think in some ways that's why you get kind of the mixed opinions from people about the Buttermilk. Some people find it to be just like very abrasive and hard to climb on, and other people finding it to be like one of the best climbing areas in the world.
Yeah, I just think it's scary because it's all so high.
It's also, okay, sure, so you have a bit of an acquired taste. Gotta learn what your legs can take.
Yeah, absolutely. Before you start to get the motorcycle leg, right?
Yeah. Well, more and more people are coming out from the gyms too, which I think is something that maybe bears a brief comment.
Yeah, that's true.
It really behooves gyms to kind of like tell people that climbing is safe and really like encourage a certain like openness and approachability to the sport, which I think is quite true by and large. But you start getting into some of these areas, people come out with like one pad, haven't really like been taught pad placement or appropriate kind of like spotting. You see like one of the two like really major things that happens, other than people getting on climbs that are just much too big and much too serious for them, is relatively new climbers will frequently push the pad all the way up against the wall.
Yeah.
And so then when they fall, they end up clipping the backside and spraining or breaking their ankles. Super
yeah.
common. The other one is because these boulders are so big and imposing, you get people who will end up stacking the pads rather than getting adequate like total ground coverage. And so up to about 20 feet, you don't really need a second pad as far as like total impact.
Yeah.
But falling even from, the start of Evilution, like fun fact, or I guess kind of scary fact, way more people have broken legs on the opening move than the top out.
Really?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Like factor of 10 maybe.
That's
so
crazy.
I'm only aware of one broken leg on the top out.
Dang,
but people
that's nice.
every season basically fall on the edge of the pad stack at the start.
Wow. So it sounds like we need an episode with Dan on proper pad placement.
I don't want to take too much responsibility, but if we're going to talk about the Buttermilks, people get messed up.
That's hilarious. Well, let's check out this first move, because right off the bat we can see that there's, they kind of like, we kind of zoomed out initially, but they showed it. We can go back to the kind of like side pulley kind of undercling right hand versus going up top. So in the video on the right, he's actually using this hold underneath. So like, what is that difference? And we'll see like in a second, it really makes this next left hand move kind of funkier on the right versus the left. But can you talk about the difference in like those two hands and like why they're used?
Sure. So the original beta that Chris Sharma did was this one on the left here. It's a big, powerful move off of a high but good left push foot. It's fairly precise and fairly powerful, but it lets you use good holds in a fairly logical position. So if you can get the distance between them, it ends up being a really nice way to do it. But it's, for a lot of people, fairly low percentage.
Oh, okay.
They have a hard time getting the distance, and you can't really hit the hole just like flat on like you'd like to. In order to get into the hole, you need to kind of like wrap around on it. Okay. Which kind of really shorts you, because you have to get into that sort of like compressed wrist position. Yeah. So you lose a lot of the distance that you'd be able to get normally. So shorter climbers or people whose style isn't naturally that powerful frequently prefer this sort of like a side pull ear approach.
Yeah, because this puts like him in like a very shouldery kind of awkward position, because he's very abducted with his shoulder, like because his body is rotating like to still face out, but then like the hand at that angle, like you're saying, kind of loading in the wrist is what I was noticing. I was like, dang, that, he must be kind of strong with his climbing, because that's I think he is kind of strong to hold. Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense. And then we can see, let's see if it's gonna show, if it plays. Like the difference, I guess I should go back a little bit to see, because on a video on the right, when he moves into, there you can see the undercling versus, and then the heel hook, but then his fall to that left hand is a bit more dramatic. Yeah. As he hits that, and then.
So part of that is actually body positioning. It's possible to do that move like with a pretty high degree of control. Yeah. But let's see if we can go back even just a little bit further here.
Let's see. Is that
see
where
if you
you're
can
talking?
see it exactly. Yeah. So watch the right foot as this kind of starts here.
Mm-hmm.
See how he's still rotated in with the right knee.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is keeping him from maintaining opposition against the left foot.
Interesting.
If you open your hips, you can all of a sudden compress between the heel and the right hand.
Oh yeah, because then if we watch then with the actual video,
foot picks as he starts going, and see how the hips open up.
Yeah, and then on the video on the left, we'll see in a minute, he actually does, before he goes to that left hand, he opens that all the way up, just like you said.
And starts to shift in on the shoulder. So actually for shorter climbers, this is something that ends up coming up a lot. When you do this first big move, you're abducted, like you were saying, and your scapula is upwardly rotated. Yeah. So it's really hard to get the power that you'd like through this set.
Exactly. Yeah, because I actually was going to make a comment on that. I was going to say, because with that scapular position, it's really actually hard to pull yourself into the wall still. Yeah. That's why you could see like that moment where he like falls away and then kind of pulls back in, because you can't generate power to like pull yourself in there very well.
No.
It's just a really mechanically disadvantaged position.
I'm a little less clear, but I think that like when you're so extended like this, it's like you don't really even have very good access to your sort of like posterior deltoids and things. So there's nothing really to pull out to. Well, the connection between the hand and the feet is not strong. So
you'd have to have such a strong lower trap, like it'd be kind of crazy.
Okay, so no, get really strong lower traps.
Really strong. more reason.
More traps.
Yeah.
So really in this position, he's holding some of his like vertical weight off of this hand, but he's really keeping his body in the wall between the opposition on his left foot and left hand. But anyways, as he kind of like moves into this position, he settles his hand, and the first thing he does is sets his scapula. So he gets kind of locked in here and starts to square up. So this starts to allow him to maintain tension between this right hand and this left foot.
Yeah.
The higher his foot gets, or the higher his center of mass gets here, your body essentially rotates in against this foot. So this is what's keeping a lot of the tension here. You're trying to sort of barn door along this line,
Right.
and so that torque is pushing into this foot. But what people end up doing is they end up in this sort of bent position here, which actually limits the amount of force you can get between these hands. So he's plenty strong to just pull this off and pops into this hand anyways. But what you'll see sometimes, especially with shorter climbers, is the straighter this line can be between the hand and the foot, the easier his moves ends up being.
Okay.
So a lot of times, the first move is such a crux that people will stick this, kind of freak out, and then end up blowing off on the second move, which is like relatively quite a bit easier, but it still requires like a fair amount of tension, and if you're not on the right hand properly, you can end up swinging out and blowing off here.
Yeah.
So,
Hey guys, sorry to interrupt the video. I just wanted to take this opportunity real quick to say that Dan actually does some remote coaching for climbers, and this video is not a sales pitch for that in any way. Dan came to do this video out of his own goodwill and just for fun. We had to coax this information out of Dan to get us to tell us, but he does do some remote coaching, he has some availability for it, and you can probably tell by this video that he knows a lot about climbing, and he also has that unique ability to articulate it and teach people about it. So if you're interested in learning more from Dan, check out the email address, shoot him an email, give him a shout, and maybe you can learn some more from him. All right, back to the video.
And I just want to reiterate again, because I loved like the insight you had with the video on the right versus the left, where like the knee, like how it was still turned in versus how he sets up to open the hips up to do that move with such control.
Yeah.
Like, it's just amazing, like those little subtle differences with just that little bit of rotation and opening up and setting in the right spot makes it look so much more controlled. But cool.
So especially with heel hooks, I'm a little less clear on the whole, lower body anatomy, but it seems that you'll see people set these heels sometimes, and you touched on this in one of your previous videos about how much it helps with the having the toe set out. But the other thing is that it's really difficult to engage heel hooks when you're twisted in through your hips or torso. All of a sudden, you don't get to take advantage of these big sort of like adductors.
Yeah, you lose that compression, and honestly, like even your body's, it's kind of like we look at like working against with like the flexors and extensors, where really they don't just work against each other; they help create stability, like in the wrist and the fingers. When you can like create that opposition with that other leg, it actually affords you more power in the leg that you're healing in, because you're generating more like central stability like through your core and through the legs to allow you to generate more force through that heel hook. So yeah, by being able to open up and get that like that additional compression, it's going to make that heel so much stronger.
Basically, the whole takeaway here is that compression in general and heel hooking in particular, you never want to be rotated in. You always want to be in an open face position. Yeah,
that makes sense. I love it. That's great. Well, cool. I mean, that was obviously like the crux of the climb, so I think it's worth spending, or crux-ish of the climb.
Yeah.
So worth spending a lot of time on that, but I think we can move on to the next one, which I think is a super cool move. So we both get set up. It looks somewhat similar setup. Obviously, I think on the right he uses an intermediate and then goes to like the big hand after.
Yeah, this is actually an interestingly complex move. Watch what happens with his right knee as he travels up to this. It's not something where you kind of like stay in line. It's this sort of crazy kind of like almost like swimming kind of move where you sort of like reach through and arc through your body. People do this in sort of two different kind of ways. One is sitting low like this and generating from the starting position with the straight arm. And this is going to end up going kind of dynamically. He's going to kind of like swing into this position. The other possibility that people do either statically or they end up doing it as sort of like a two-part dynamic move is if you tuck this knee way harder, you can roll in and get your forearm basically across your chest.
Oh, wow.
Which gives you a much like it gives you kind of like a brace against yourself.
Yeah.
It also cues you to come really tightly into this drop knee. And so you can kind of set your lower body in the position that it's going to want to be in as you go through this hold. And then use a small amount of like sort of like chest and sort of like upper body momentum to carry up to this hold. And it ends up being just a very small little movement.
So that way when you hit it, like you're in the position you would like when you want to grab the hold.
Exactly. And that's another sort of like rule of thumb for sort of like progressing technique at the sort of intermediate advanced level is, as much as possible, if you can think about where you're most stable on each set of holds, you're not really trying to move between those. You're trying to, you're not trying to translate, I guess, like over that course. You're trying to figure out how to get best from like stable position to stable position. You know, people spend a lot of time kind of like in these sort of half lock-offs and kind of like maneuvering between these things, and that ends up a lot of times like you get your hand on the hold, which is a lot of people's objective. You know, it's like, okay, I'm going to this next hand hold, but if your body's out of position, you end up with these big swings and things, and so it's like, even if you maybe don't hit the hand quite as well, if you put your body in the correct place, it ends up being a lot easier. So often people will start at the bottom of the climb and only work from the start because they're like, oh, well, if I stick this move, I want to send the climb. You know? But ultimately you end up both learning a lot less that way and sort of sabotaging yourself because you end up just sort of like getting fatigued over the course of the session, potentially dialing or even working in sort of like lazy wrong sequences because you've started to take the opening sequence for granted and haven't yet like figured out where you're trying to get to. But yeah, so that kind of reverse engineering can be really effective.
I like it.
A little off track, but you know.
But I mean, still helpful.
So this is, again, kind of the classic beta on the left here. If you're a little shorter, you end up jumping.
Okay.
But in both cases, you end up sort of folded in on yourself. You do have opposition, which I think is, again, one of those kind of like rules for kind of reading routes and a indicator for good beta. You know, it's like at all times, if you're not just down pulling on a straight like ladder rung kind of thing, you want to be looking for like where the opposition's coming from, whether it's kind of like pressing between a hand and a foot or squeezing between these two hands like this. It's really what lets you kind of like stay on the wall. If you have, again, something that's like pushing you to the side or pulling you to the side and you have nothing to oppose it with, you're just gonna go spinning off, or you're gonna spend a really like excessive amount of force kind of just dangling it. But given that, especially in this position, it turns out that there's a jug just right here. So if you just grab the jug.
Grab the jug.
People don't do it, but grab the jug.
Points out, you should always grab the jug.
Rule on rock climbing. Grab the jugs whenever possible.
Grab the jug.
So these guys look like they have plenty of endurance and don't really need to worry about it. But one of the things that I think is a useful technique for boulders like this that are either on the longer side for boulders or are like the Peabody in general, where you have like very sharp angle changes, is it's really beneficial to just charge through the bottom. You can possibly skip moves, climb fast, like anything you can do to kind of like increase like efficiency and decrease time on the wall. Because not only are you kind of fighting your like sort of fitness levels, but frequently you're also kind of like rolling and compromising skin as you go. So if you can get up to the top without having your skin rolling and sort of like betraying you, you're going to be in a happier place for this top sequence.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And if you're scared, obviously, a little bit of pump goes a long way.
A little bit of pump when you're scared feels like the most pump you've ever had. I can't do it, I'm too pumped.
Yeah, and getting through a sequence with like kind of like a nice, efficient style, I think brings a lot of just confidence as well. You know, if you're like, I just smashed the crux, you know, you're probably feeling pretty good.
Yeah, you feel good, and then you know that, you know, it's going to look even better on the Instagram, you know, which is always important. So why else do we climb? You know?
I mean, if you send but don't make it look good, I mean. Heel hooks, open
Heel
hips,
hooks,
check it out.
Open hips. It's nice and open. He has the other foot there. It looks beautiful. He has like the good rotation, and he's able to kind of power through, like once he's just kind of resting in here. But let's see when he actually goes to pull back up, gets it into position, and boom, you see, just like you said, he gets the hip in the right position, drops the foot more underneath him. So then he can...
And he uses this little smear as a little boost off of the right also. I think probably a little bit subconscious a lot of times, but you're also, when he's kind of like initiating this, you're super end range on a couple of these muscles. And so just being able to use like a little bit of boost, even if it's off of something like kind of crappy, to get you back into that sort of more like mid-range where you're just sort of like stronger and more comfortable, can go a long way on really a lot of move types.
Yeah, because that right hand is just down towards his chest. Like,
lock it off of your hips.
Super locked off. And then I think it shows like I like coming up here. I mean, we have it shows the hold again.
Strange angle on it.
I like this next part because how many people know like the Frogger stretch? Frogger stretch. Ready? Wait for it. It's coming. I think it's coming. I can't do that. I need to work on it still. More and more. But like, his hips are still pretty darn close to the wall. That just mobility, because imagine if his hips weren't, then
Yeah.
he's going to be pushed further away. Then like it just showed like those
They're not very
small
in-cut,
ledges.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
being
if-
able to sit underneath
yeah,
them.
if you're sitting underneath it versus all of a sudden your hips push you out,
Yeah.
that's like potentially the difference of holding on to it and not.
And you're right at the transition here. So it's like the jug that he stands on the lip is still like slightly under this overhang. Meanwhile, his
Yeah.
hands are getting up onto the slab.
Ugh.
And so being able to keep your hips kind of like sucked in and take advantage of that ledge to stand on
Yeah.
versus starting to kind of like come out and be sort of dangling out on those holds
Right.
can make a real difference in difficulty.
Yeah, so Frogger stretch, hip mobility, stretching. It's important, guys. Okay, so this one, another look at that hip mobility.
Yeah,
I mean, he gets
incredible.
a little like lean to his right to get it up there. But again, if you don't have like the hip mobility to do that, you're
Yeah.
kind of screwed. So I have like a little drill that I like with this. It's, you know, whether you do like that deep squat or like a Garland's pose or even just a child's pose with that like side bend shift towards that leg, you get the mobility first. Then if you're like standing like up against a wall, like a wall in your home, and you work on just that mobility, then you have that active range coupled with the stretch. So you stretch, you mobilize the hip, mobilize those structures, and then you actively work it up. You can even like use your hand to help pull the knee up and then try and like engage the muscles as much as you can and then release. But really work on that awareness of those muscles at that end range position. Because obviously that makes it easier for him.
So what you're trying to do is get kind of like chest to the wall and then try to do sort of high step drills?
Yeah, because a lot of people are gonna like when they do that high step, they're gonna lean back to get it
Right.
up higher. But if you're forcing yourself to stay like hips or chest close to the wall, then you start to force that pattern of movement when you're actually doing that high step drill.
So you get to practice a really functional movement set for this
Yeah,
type of thing.
exactly.
Interestingly, a lot of people actually use this lower foot.
Oh.
And so it's kind of crazy that he's both, I think, taller than kind of the average person who does this climb and has enough flexibility still to like cram this up by his
Yeah,
face.
seriously.
Which gets some really nice opposition against this kind of in-cut right gas stone.
Yeah,
So that's actually like really cool beta.
I love it. Cool. And then I don't know, you know this climb, like, is there more stuff coming up that's kind of cool?
Just a little bit. He's getting to like the last kind of situation. Like basically nobody ever falls after you get this right hand that he's on, but you do come into this little kind of oh, interesting. Well, oh no, that's right. This is just a funny angle. So the left hand is kind of like a sloper jug, and you do this last sort of little mantle sequence, which he's actually also using kind of unusual data for.
Yeah,
but,
high foot.
but yeah, once you're here, it's over. There's
Then,
just,
yeah, because he like
yeah.
just pauses for a while, hangs out, relaxes.
Yeah, I guess this, the general takeaways were kind of how to approach like working a boulder as far as learning body positions and things. I think that sort of the more you can visualize how you want your body to travel over the course of a climb, the more efficiently you can do it. When people start climbing, they frequently don't really know where they're going, much less how they're going to do it. And as your career kind of advances, you start kind of thinking about handholds and then footholds and then sort of like body positions, and you can slowly start storing more and more of it. But I think of all of the techniques that are accessible to newer climbers, like so many training modalities aren't really appropriate until later on in your career. But something that you can do right away is just start really visualizing what you're planning on doing and what happened on your last attempt. And that'll start giving you just like a better sort of mental architecture for understanding and diagnosing what you did and why.
Yeah.
And that in combination with this approach of just sort of like feeling body positions, like even on climbs that you maybe aren't anywhere near strong enough to get on, you're still potentially able to like establish on holds. And so sometimes just pulling onto these like crux positions or positions on climbs that you're either working or are possibly too hard for you, you can kind of like establish on the wall and shift around some and see where the sort of natural like hang line is. And by starting to build a larger sort of mental repertoire of where these efficient positions are, you can start to visualize and imagine like where your body needs to travel for these moves. And that can just make sort of more consistent, productive use of your time climbing.
I think a good key point is what Dan kind of started mentioning was like reverse engineer these moves. Don't just, try like, what was it, like from the bottom like every time.
Yeah.
Like try these different sequences and put yourself in the position where you want to be once you grab the hold, right? That way you learn that position and that tension before you move into it.
There's also so many videos available
Yeah.
these days that like if you find somebody who seems to have a similar climbing style to you or that has similar body dimensions, it can be really useful kind of like building up a pool of those climbers that you're like, okay,
Yeah.
like even though it's not necessarily me, I know that like these 3 or 4 people tend to approach things or climb things in a way that's like similar to myself.
I'm just gonna watch all of them of Dan because he says to try and skip holds. He likes to jump to them, and he loves using jugs.
Yeah.
And I mean,
No crimps, no pockets, no slopers, just jugs.
Train
Until they're all jugs.
Train until they're all jugs. That's what I should say instead. Train until they're all jugs. Just in case you didn't catch it, Dan does have some availability for remote coaching. And honestly, after this, I know you guys are gonna be super interested. I know I am. I already took all the available slots. So good luck trying to sign up, but you might as well send him an email anyways, just to see if there's some availability, maybe in like 2022.
Dude, say something cool so they like the videos and subscribe for more awesome content.
Like and subscribe for more super sweet vids, y'all.
So lame, dude. So lame.
I thought it was pretty good.